Hello and welcome to Small World's Big Adventures. Today we have a gaming video for you with me and Desmond. Today we'll be talking about BattleTech, a tabletop war game that has been around for 40 years now. Originally brought out by FASA, FASA, I'm not sure if you even pronounce it, and today it is put out by Catalyst. But it has been out in one form or another for 40 years, both as a tabletop game and also as video games and some various other media. This is definitely a game from my youth. I have not played it in probably close to 30 years, and recently we had our first game with the new system, and it would have been Dez's first game.
Indeed. Much younger man.
True. So we both kind of came at it from different directions, although we both have experience with other tabletop war games. We've both played some 40k. I think you've mostly done patrols.
Yeah, we've been doing combat patrols. So we've done smaller like kill team skirmishes and like 2 proper 2,000 point games.
I've mostly done 2,000 point games with the older rules. I haven't played that in a while. We played OPR a few times and a handful of other stuff. So we're not unfamiliar with tabletop war games. BattleTech, though, is arguably, even in its current iteration, still one of the most in-depth, complex tabletop war games I think that they have out there. Although there is a simplified version of it
Called Alpha Shrink,
which is more in line with kind of more modern 40k or whatever else you have, using rulers and stuff instead of a hex grid, and kind of simplified rules and stats for the mechs. And in fact, this is, I think this might be where the term mech comes from. I'm going to claim that.
Well, Scott did claim that. He was very wrong. It turns out that the term mech has its roots traced back to World War II, if not earlier. Those types of robots were used in propaganda to represent the military might of Japan. And then it extended into its media like anime, and from there trickled over to the United States. Now, BattleTech might be the first use of mech in the United States, but it is not the origin of the term.
What was your impression just as a game in general, overall?
Coming in as a first timer, for me personally, it wasn't too much more complex than I was used to. I mean, I've lived in this family for many years. I'm adjusted quite well to more complex board games and the like. Personally, it was maybe a little more luck dependent than I would have liked. Certainly throughout the game, I had many a bad roll I would have not preferred to have had. Really affected my game more than the strategy elements I tend toward. But otherwise, I quite enjoy the game. This seems to be a lot of fun rules to be able to play with as you get further down in the system. I'm greatly excited to play more.
What do you think, kind of comparing this to some other tabletop war games that you've played?
Certainly, I prefer it more than the current format like Warhammer 40k is going into. I've never been a terribly big fan of the system they use, having like multiple codexes you have to read through in order to know the rules. For the most part, if you know the rules, you know what the other team is going to have, and that's a big part of planning the strategy. Otherwise, it seems fairly similar.
Yeah, a big comparison today is 40k, and this is not 40k, although the more action-packed version kind of is closer to that. While you do have different factions, the different factions mostly don't have specialized rules. They don't have their own, like I said, codex or group book to that you have to have in order to play that. Most of them are just, this is how the mechs work, and you can play however, whatever you want on the board. There's some leeway in that, but for the most part, that is essentially the game. Whereas especially if you're looking at Warhammer 40k, you have to have your own army book. Yeah, you kind of need to know what the other people's army books do, and in order to find all the little fiddly rules on top of that. Most of the fiddly rules in this is needing to know on the map and damage taken to your mech and how fast you moved and stuff like. You need to know basically how to shoot.
There are a lot of like statistic modifiers to keep track of.
And there's a lot of them, but I do feel like once we got towards the end of the game, we had an idea of
certainly
most of what we needed to know in general. I will point out this is the box set we got, and is the only thing we played so far, which is BattleTech, a game of armored combat, which is basically a step up from the beginner box. There is a beginner box.
Neither is.
This was about $50, and in past that, there's more advanced rule books, both for just the mechs themselves, and then also combined combat for tanks and infantry and air support, and then there's actually stuff for space combat and things like that.
Indeed.
As a person who played the original BattleTech some number of years ago, and coming back to it, it's interesting because the game itself is basically the same as I remember it, but I feel like the ranges for weapons were shrunk for this, and I could very well be wrong because it's been so long, but it feels like it made this a more necessarily close quarters combat. And I wonder if that's partly to kind of speed up because there's a hand-to-hand aspect that you can do, and honestly, once you got in close, it was pretty brutal.
Indeed. Specifically, the kicking feature did quite a number on his forces from my side, and nearly tied up the game for us, even though I was in arguably the losing position.
Yeah, that very true. You got in a couple of good kicks with them and nearly took one of mine that had basically not been touched at that point. The most expensive one, I think.
Indeed, the catapult.
Before we started, we played the first scenario, which is very basic. It's 4-on-4 of the same types of mechs.
4-on-4 attackers versus defenders on actually 2 of the battle mats they include, which are about 1.5 feet across.
Yeah, I think we were both unimpressed with that as being the first scenario that they have in what is their second most basic set. Because this doesn't have all the more advanced rules. Well, it's got most of it. There's special stuff with some weapons, and it's clear that it's on the sheets that you have for this, but it's not explained in here what that might mean. As an example, both the map that they chose was maybe a little more advanced than somebody who's just coming to this. One was a bunch of canyons and mountains that were kind of hard to navigate.
There's a lot of depth variation on one side of the map, and when you're coming into the game, having to fight with that will also introduce like jumping rules. That was maybe a bit more than they should have introduced with.
Yeah, I would have gone with a little more simplified map on both sides. The other side had basically 2 lakes and a river, which took up a big chunk of that, which also made it hard to maneuver on that side of the map. The first thing you do going into your first match is you don't want to run into water and then have to make a piloting roll and then fall down, which almost had to on that map unless you crossed the one bridge across that. So that was kind of a weird option. The victory condition setup was also a little bit weird and a little unclear, but it basically was just a fight to the death, which for us, being our first game, ended up taking us 7 hours to play.
Easy.
Which, to be fair, BattleTech, especially back in the day, you could expect a good 4 or 5 hour game, but that was a little long, and we were both pretty well done.
Yeah.
Well before the end of the game. We bought BattleTech, the Game of Armored Combat,
which is the upgraded version of the base set.
Yeah, and by all accounts, pretty well decent. So the base set comes with 2 models and just a real simple outline of the rules. We also bought a separate map pack, which we'll discuss in a minute, but I had an issue with the map pack. Go ahead and show off and then kind of go over what you think of the stuff that came with it. I guess I'm interested. This was about $50.
And just so you've gone through some of this as we had played before, and included is a little punch-out sheet. It includes some various terrain modifiers. It includes more depth and elevation so you don't modify your maps. It includes 8 of the mechs in cardboard standee form.
I think the same mechs that come as the models in the box, I think.
You get a little era-specific rulebook, which should modify rules and what mechs you would bring, I believe.
Felt really weird to have that in this box.
Included is this little handy-dandy modifier sheet, which includes a long list of the modifiers used in combat, and various like PSR rules for your pilots.
It's printed on kind of a light cardboard, and criminally insane that there are not 2 of these in here.
Indeed. So, especially as your battles size up, it would be lovely to have both sides having a shoe like that.
At minimum, there should have been 2.
What included were 2 maps.
Is it just the 2 maps in there? So they're double-sided maps.
Yeah, they're double-sided. One has grassland, the other side is desert.
Okay, I didn't realize there were just 2, but 2.
There may have been more, but we bought a map pack and then
we got
split them.
split stuff.
So, results may vary. Get the rulebook, which includes basically all of these base rules and a shrunk-down version of the construction rules, I believe.
Yeah, there's a couple of different things in there, but how to build your own mech, especially for just this, is in there. The rulebook. The rule book is on the lower end, in my opinion, of rule books. Playing the game, there were numerous times it was hard to find the rule, specific rule we're looking for. A good example is consciousness rolls. If a mech is hit in the head, you have to make a consciousness roll. And I was pretty sure I had read that somewhere, but then when it first actually happened in the game, it took us like 10 minutes to find it in the rule book, because it was not, there's no index, it's only a table of contents, and it's not listed in the table of contents. Some of the stuff in there is in odd spots.
Indeed. Yeah, like glossary or like a proper index would help that greatly.
Again, it's a basic rule book. It's not like the big like hardback or anything, but also I'm first coming to this game to this.
I'd argue it's more important for this to be well organized than the base rule book.
As
well as a short story written in the proper game setting. I believe it does follow the actual rules in combat, so could be a neat read. Included are a set to play Alpha Strike, their kind of skirmish style version of this. Basically included the cards of the stats and then your pilots. We've not played that yet, so we don't have any.
We don't have the rules or anything. The rules for the Alpha Strike don't come with this, but they give you a card for each of the models that come with the box.
With the remainder of our little standees for our first fight in here. Should shove these to the side. And then there's the 8 physical models, probably the proper ones you're looking for. I have pilfered into these, so a couple of these are painted.
2 dice.
2 wonderful dice that we have definitely used.
Standard 6-sided dice.
And then a lore power from the universe, which indicates the majority of the major powers, has a map of the system, the inner system, basically everything you need to get properly acquainted with the universe.
I think it's also got, or was that one of the other things maybe? No, I guess it was one. I think one of the things came with some pictures of painted mechs or already done, so you can have an idea of what to paint if you want it to be a specific group, but that might have been the history one.
Yes.
What is your opinion, I guess, is kind of my final question. That is what came in the box. Excuse me. What is your opinion on all of this?
Overall, for physical piece quality, it seems fine. I've played TTRPGs and other board games came with units. I wouldn't call this particularly impressive of a showing, but for $50 for a tabletop board game, I'm not complaining much.
Okay, so my opinion is a little bit different. A little underwhelmed for $50. I think most of the thought that goes into that price is the 8 mechs the models that come with it, which, granted, they are reasonably sharp models. Like I like these models.
Well, especially, I think we differ on that. While I'm certainly fine with the other elements of this game, I'm a little disappointed with these models personally. As a person who mainly engages with the tabletop hobby as like a way of miniature painting, these details are going to be a lot blurrier since they are pre-built. All the nubs and other like mold lines are still left in, and I noticed a lot of warping on these. So straight up from a painting perspective, I would call these honestly subpar.
That's fair. I have not been to the point where I've painted them any yet. So my understanding is the Catalyst Games restarted BattleTech with a Kickstarter to see if there was even going to be enough interest in the game to make it profitable to run it. The models give you enough for, especially for just that first scenario they give you. One person can use the plastic models, and one person has to use standees. And I don't know why at $50 with literally it's these models and an instruction and then basically some extra stuff that I don't need or care about at this point in the game, why there isn't a second set of models for at least that first one. I can kind of get why maybe it's got, I think, 6 scenarios in the rule book, why you don't have all the models that they list as possible things for the rest of those, but for that first one I don't get why there aren't just a handful, maybe just 4 more models in here for $50. Like you said, you don't feel like the models are all that high quality. We've kind of looked into the models that they sell, and they are on the high-end price for miniatures.
Unfortunately, that is the trend nowadays towards
it depends.
tabletop gaming.
It depends on where you're playing. They're not as bad as 40K yet, but they're more expensive than, say, most of the Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder miniatures,
Certainly.
which are still a pretty good deal. The game is supposed to be model agnostic, so you can bring pretty much anything you want to either signify your models or 3D print models and stuff like that, which is great. I like that that's the case, but like for $50, honestly, I'm a little underwhelmed with what comes in the box. I would have been happy if it was. I would have been happier maybe if it had those, and then there's a whole system for shooting and stuff. In the suggestions, you put a dice next to your mech after it's moved to show whether it's walked, ran, or jumped, or stayed stationary, and then like the target to hit it. And there's a whole sets of dice that show you those things. If it come with maybe a set of those dice for each of the models, would have been nice. I'm not sure. For $50, this was a little steep in price for I think what you get. Not terrible. It's an okay starting point, especially if you've not played and you don't have any models. At least it comes with some, but like I said, for me, a little underwhelming.
Ever put anything out there for you? If I remember correctly, a kill team right now for 40K, which is their skirmish style games with their smaller game, starting about $50 for a team. So, compared to that, you get a set of the rules and basically just the models for that box, and that's all you get. Compared to the price, BattleTech's certainly cheaper, though, as my father was saying, in terms of relative price for what you get.
I mean, one thing, and you said, like, you can see, I think these are decent, especially from a distance. They're blocky, bulky robot men. I've not been down close enough to paint them to see, like you said, kind of the warping on some of the guns and mold lines, but the quality of like 40K models now are top notch.
Oh, certainly.
Like, you are paying a lot, but you're also getting pretty quality models, and these are on the upper end of price range for not quite the quality that a lot of other companies are putting out.
I would say the problem about it is the like Reaper kind of like just pre-plastic, pre-molded minis you can get, but they are not of a standard I would enjoy painting commonly.
Yeah, for somebody who plays a lot of games, what I would have liked, I think, ultimately would have been a cheap starter instructions, and then gone ahead and just either printed out my own models or used like the two sets of cardboard standees for like $25. I think honestly would have been a better deal than what this is. For somebody who's not into something like that, having the plastic in your hand can be very exciting. I mean, it is. Yeah. I think so. You painted a couple of these; they look great. So your mileage may vary, but just a little bit disappointed, I guess, is my opinion. This was our first match with the newer BattleTech rules. Again, this was your very first game with it. This was my first game in more than a decade. And we both kind of come fresh to the rules. Like I remember some of this. We definitely plan on playing some more games. In fact, the plan is probably to do 3 or 4 more games and then come back and do another review of kind of where we feel like stuff are sitting at. Going forward, especially into the second game, like we've already learned a couple things that we probably want to do. We're probably going to print out some extra models and see how we already downloaded some STLs from one specific company and see if we can find some others. Probably won't buy more models from Catalyst, to be honest.
Yeah.
So we'll probably try the download route and see how that goes. We need to print out a second sheet of targeting information because having just one of those was bad. That was another complaint about the rulebook. I don't understand why, at the very least, the back page of the rulebook doesn't have a second copy. We'll look into maybe a couple different ways to play. There are a couple more scenarios in the book. I'm not quite sure what those are, so we'll see if there's some more maybe objective-based stuff. We had bought a map pack in addition to the maps that come with this because that seemed like a good idea. And then right away, reading about the map packs, the whole big thing with the maps, especially that come with this, is they're designed to go together basically from any direction. Now they don't quite fit because like one has a road going across it and just disappears, but the hexes all match up, and the map pack specifically says they don't. And I don't understand why that got past any type of quality control.
I can disagree with that. That seems very odd.
It seemed odd to me.
But still, with any luck, in a year or so's investment, we should have nice 3D terrain for this and not kind of hard to read paper.
Somebody plans to personally craft some terrain for future matches.
Depth perception is hard on very flat paper.
Yeah, honestly, and compared to what we used to play with, talking about the maps, this has actually a really good. They're a little hard to see, especially from a distance, but it tells you what terrain almost every hex is and what, like, if it's rubble and stuff. The maps we used to play with did not have, like, it had some of that on there, but not a lot of it. So that actually was kind of handy. But yeah, having a 3D representation of stuff would be really good. Overall, as long as the game was and frustrating at times, I definitely enjoyed it.
And certainly I did too.
Yeah, and look forward to playing some more games. So we will have a wrap up after we've played a few more. You can find us here if you hit the notification bell. That'll let you know when. If you like and subscribe, that'll definitely help the algorithm bring us back to your page and see. And if you've played BattleTech, or if you've played old BattleTech, or if you're interested in know stuff, or if you want to argue with us and say that we were wrong about the quality of the models or what came in the box, comment down below. I'd love to hear from you.